And I broke my ring light yesterday.
Oh
So that's
no.
another thing. But, oh well. Hey everyone, and welcome back to BakedHR. My name's Jazmine Wilkes, and I am here with my co-host, Kristina Minyard. Hi, Kristina. How are you doing tonight?
Hello, Jazmine. I'm doing well. How are you doing tonight?
It's Alabama and tornado warning and
like,
watches. So, we're here. We're surviving.
We're gonna be okay. We're gonna be okay, Jazmine.
We're
only under watch until like 1 a.m.
Yeah.
It's not that serious.
Only. But we are going to be okay because we also have a guest and friend with us tonight.
Yay! I'm so excited. Tamara, when did I meet you? Where did we meet originally?
At some conference, I'm sure.
Right, surely. I bet we interacted online before we met in person.
Probably.
But I'm going to tell, I cannot wait. I cannot wait until I can pack my little overnight bag and go to DC and go have dinner with you when all of this stinking pandemic is over.
Right. Right. No, good times for sure.
I miss traveling so much. So tell our audience a little about yourself. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right. Well, thank you, ladies, for having me on your podcast. I'm so excited. My name is Tamara Rasberry. I am an HR practitioner. I have been in the HR field for a little over 20 years. I currently work as a director of HR and operations for a nonprofit organization in Washington, D.C., which is where I'm from. I also do my own work on the side, kind of helping employers understand the importance of mental health in the workplace and different steps they can take to incorporate mental health into their culture. Also other kind of like DEI topics, but I usually always try to come from like a mental health advocacy lens in all of the work that I do. So that's me kind of in a nutshell. That's probably the type of stuff you want me to talk about on this show. I can talk about some other stuff, but then we ain't here for that. So
we can talk about all kinds of stuff, but we are definitely excited to have you here to talk about mental health. So I know we had you come down to Huntsville. Jazmine, when was that? You're still programs, aren't you?
Still programs, and it was March.
It's almost a year ago now.
Yeah. Right before everything shut down.
It was the last trip I went on before everything got shut down. It was the last trip.
I did not realize that until just now.
Wow. I think that was like 2 days before we sent all of our employees to start working from home. So, wow. So it's almost been a year since we've seen you in person. Yeah. But your presentation that you did to Nature, I think Jazmine shared that it got great reviews. I love that you have been so passionate about mental health and talking about it in the workplace. We, I guess, pretend kind of as a society like, oh, you've got your places that are like, we're a family. We spend so much time together, so we're a family. Or you spend so much time together, you spend more time with us than you do your family or whatever. But we don't talk about important things like what it takes to survive spending so much time together, or how you can be your best self in as many situations as possible, including work. So we wanted to have you on the show tonight to talk a little bit about how you started advocating for, mental wellness, and how can an organization bring that into their workplace? Like, where would they even start?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so you just want me to start talking?
Yep.
Is that your question? Is that the lead-in?
That's the lead-in, Tamara. I mean, basically tonight, this is your show. You tell the people what you want to tell the people.
Okay, no worries. So basically, I started advocating for mental health as an offshoot of dealing with my own mental health issues, right? So probably since my late teen years, I've dealt with some version of depression. It used to be what they call dysthymia, which is kind of just a mild depression, but you always have it. Like, so like my normal sense of being was like a low grade depression. But as I got older, it uh, morphed into a more major depression. So I've had periods where I've had really, really, really severe lows. And coming out of that, but also realizing that I still had to go to work. I still had to like be, taking care of my business and still had to do all these things. And, this is something that I know that not only I deal with because, depression is one of I think it is the biggest disability in the world. And so it's definitely not just me that's dealing with this, but you don't hear people talking about it at work. And so whenever something happens to someone at work physically, they get a lot of outpouring of sympathy and people are like, what can we do to help you? And do you need time off and all of these things? But then, what about that person who is having a mental health challenge and they need support, but they're afraid of the stigma of it? What really got me being more vocal about it online and everything was that when I would say something about it, I would always get a lot of messages, like private messages, like, aren't you afraid of what this will do with you admitting that you have this? Aren't you afraid, someone from your job will see it? Or aren't you afraid you might not get a job or something like that? And that really got me thinking like, wow, like people are really dealing with this. Cause I'm like, if you don't want to hire me or work with me because I just said I deal with depression, then I most likely don't want to work there anyway. So we can just cut out, we don't even have to have a conversation, but a lot of people are dealing with this. Like I've heard so many stories of people saying like, I wish I could be more open, but I'm just afraid, and so I'm like, we have to make this a common conversation so that people don't feel like they can't talk about it, so that people don't feel like, you know, they're having like a mental breakdown, but they're still going to try to drag themselves to work because they don't know how to say they need time off. Like all of these different things that people are going through, and this was pre-pandemic, 45, pre all this other stuff, you know, where it's just people are going through so much, and you see it all the time where people are like, oh, I thought I was the only one, or you're not the only one. Like nobody is the only one, but so many people feel like they are because people are afraid to talk about it. So one of my biggest things is getting rid of the stigma of talking about mental health, mental illness, mental disorders, mental challenges, all of those things, because 1 in 5 people have had or will have some type of mental health challenge in their life. That's a lot of folks.
Yeah, if you look at your workforce, 1 in 5, that's a huge portion of your workforce. I feel like I have been fairly open-minded about mental health challenges. I come from, there are people in my family who battle depression and anxiety, and a family member who has borderline personality disorder, which is like a whole different conversation. And so, I've seen it up close. I've dealt with it up close as someone who loves somebody else with it. And so I try to look at it through a different lens, but still don't know how to fit that into my organization's normal conversation, right? Because I can't imagine if I take a phone call from an employee tomorrow and they say, Kristina, I cannot work today. I'm having a down day. I can't get out of bed. I'm depressed. I cannot work today. And then me in turn going back to the leadership team and saying that, and them being like, okay, check on them, or, whatever is in place that we decide, and everyone else goes on about their work. I feel like one of two things would happen. And not just the organization I'm at right now, but I'm thinking about like every organization I've worked at in my adult life, right? It would be, oh my God, send somebody over to check on them and make sure. In fact, Jazmine, you were there when we did that, right?
Yep.
To make sure, like a wellness check, make sure someone's not about to hurt themselves. or they're faking it to get a day off. Like, I feel like there's, those extremes. And not to say that any particular company is a bad employer, but I think it comes back to like the stigma and being uneducated and
That
not
lack of
really
understanding.
processing. And so I think about, like, and I know we don't like to do this, but I think about, like, generationally, I think my generation is much more open to having that conversation, where like the boomers that probably run the company are like, we just sucked it up and moved on. I don't understand what you're telling me. So I don't know how to overcome that as the HR professional for the organization.
Yeah. I think the easiest way to start, like sometimes some organizations are kind of more progressive than others. So your organization as far as like where you can start. Some people, you might have to start with like very little baby steps, like just making sure that, like, if you have an intranet or a newsletter or something, that you put stuff about mental health resources in there, right? Or that you talk about it when you have your open enrollment for your benefits and things like that. Just putting it in people's mind that it's okay for us to talk about this, or even that it's okay for you to be dealing with this, even if you don't want to talk about it. Because everyone's not going to want to talk to their work people about their mental health challenges. Everyone's not going to want to say, I need a week off for this. If they have sick leave, they might just say, I just need sick leave, and they might not tell you what it's for. And that's fine. I actually kind of advocate for like keep your business to yourself. But I think it's important for people to know that the resources are there and that someone is there for them if they do need something. One thing that I would do in my office is I put like posters up in my office about like mental health resources, and if you need to talk, call, what I'm saying? So kind of just so every time someone walks by or every time someone's in my office, they're getting that subliminal message of, okay, it's okay for me to talk about this, or it's okay for me to be dealing with this. I'm not the only person. I put that 1 in 5 poster up in my office. So, as soon as someone walks in, it's like, oh, wow, am I one of the 5? Or, but 1 in 5 is a lot of people, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, just so people realize that people are dealing with these things. You are not the only one. This is something that is happening. And, I'll talk about it pretty much every chance I get. I also incorporate into different conversations. Like if we're having a staff meeting, and someone will make a comment about, let's say they said like, oh, I worked all weekend last weekend. And I'm like, oh, really? What did you do for yourself? Did you take care of, did you take some extra days off because of that? What have you? And I'll say it in front of the whole staff to kind of normalize self-care, making sure that you're not burning yourself out. And just like little things like
Self-care
that,
Sunday.
but I think they add up. And then also, we always say, well, I always say, change starts from the top. So kind of getting your leadership just on board with, changing language and things like that. So, I definitely
When
have
you
worked.
when you first went to your leadership to talk about stuff like changing language or, looking for ways to improve, like, what was their reaction?
It's funny because I have a tenuous working relationship with with leadership because I have a lot of ideas. But there wasn't the pushback that you might expect. It's kind of like they're in this space where they want to become a place people want to work. So now it's kind of easier to have these type of conversations because you can pivot it to, well, if this is the type of organization that we want to have, then these are the type of things that we need to start doing, And so it really wasn't a difficult conversation, but also I had already started doing the stuff before I actually like went to leadership about it. I just started doing my own stuff, and I just start, um, putting up stuff about mental health, and, I'll always send out reminders throughout the year about the EAP, or, if something major happens in the world, I'll tell people, make sure you reach out to someone. Like, I'll just send stuff out throughout the year just to put it on people's radar, you know. And so I was already starting to do that. So when it became like, okay, we really need to make these adjustments, it wasn't like a total, like, where's she coming from with this?
Yeah.
Like, because you could
Okay.
already, I was already, dropping the breadcrumbs kind of.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. And you know what? I do that often whenever I want to change something. I just start doing it, and then I say, "Oh, hey, here's the plan for," and and just treat it like it was something that they all expected me to do anyway.
Right. Like, didn't we say we were going to do this? We said we was going to do this.
So when you say, like, when like events happen or world events or whatever, did you send something out maybe the day of the Capitol riots? Especially, I mean, for us it was traumatizing, and we're all the way down here in Alabama. I mean, you guys are right in the middle of it. I don't think that you work very far from the White House, if I remember correctly. I don't know.
I know.
I'm geographically
Thankfully, we weren't in the office, but no, I worked half a block from the White House. So uh, we've definitely had our
did
challenges
you
there.
Did you
That I
send
went.
something out to everyone acknowledging like the events, or telling them, like you said, like reach out to someone?
Not the same day, because by the time I found out about it, it was the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, it was definitely like, okay, we're all going through, do what you need to do. It was kind of one of those, if you can't work today, because a lot of people were like thoroughly traumatized about it. So it's like, if you can't work today, if you need a day off, I'm always telling people, excuse me, if you can't work today, like, just because we're working from home doesn't mean that you're not still going to have days where you're too stressed, or you're too, down or whatever. So take the time that you need, if you need to take a moment to deal with, what does this mean? Because a lot of people are like, what does this mean? Does this, are they going to do it again? And what's happening? Take that time. I'm definitely a proponent of take the time to get your mental status together, because you're not going to be productive. You're not going to be able to work. You're just going to, what's the point? Even when we were in the office, I would be like, what is the point of dragging yourself into the office just to sit there and focus on something else all day?
And
When,
refresh Twitter all
right,
day long, or
when you
whatever
know
it
that
is.
you're not in the right headspace to be productive that day. So
Yeah. So, on that particular day, like I just like sat on the floor the rest of the afternoon and just stared at the TV and like group text with Jazmine and a couple of other people. And so I ended up having to log back on later in the day to make up for the work that I didn't do that afternoon. When I was in sales, I like many years ago, I had a boss who would always say, if you're having an off day, go like file or something. Like, don't go out and do sales calls. I mean, they weren't like take the day off. They weren't going to go that far.
do something different.
Right. They were just like, do something where you're not interacting with the customers, which I think in HR, we still have plenty of things we can do where we don't interact with the customer, whoever you call your customer in HR. I know there's some debate about that. And I just remember like always appreciating that. But if I had a boss today who said, hey, if you're having an off day, just take the day, take a mental health day, whatever it is, I would just be like, I mean, because I've never worked anywhere that would be like that. So I think that is an excellent reflection of what you've accomplished from where you sit to impact the culture and make this progress. Do you get a lot of feedback from the employees on some of these things that you've implemented?
Absolutely. And that to me is like the biggest thing when I get feedback from employees. Like my office is closed the last week of the year, the week between Christmas and New Year's. And right before we went out, I sent out an email to all staff saying, this is the end of the year. Everyone's going to be out. something to the effect of, don't bombard your colleagues with a bunch of requests for them to try to have to get through before we go out on vacation, or to make them think that they have to work during vacation. This is a time for all of us to have a break and refresh, right? And I got so much feedback from staff, like, oh my goodness, thank you for saying that. Like, thank you for sending that, because I was getting all these requests. Everybody wants to meet on the last day and all this stuff. And they're like, thank you so much. So like, to me, those are the types of things that I can do without having to be like, oh my goodness, what does my supervisor think? What does the president think? What does the think? But I'm just going to be like, look, think about yourself, but think about your colleagues as well, because that's something else that I think is important for employers to get, is it's not just you, it's your team, it's your colleagues, it's everyone. So, I don't want you to overwhelm yourself, but I don't want you to overwhelm your team either. Like, I want you to think about the dynamic of the organization that you're working with. It's another reason why I will always say, and I had this conversation with someone earlier, like when employers focus on recognizing people who basically overwork themselves more than, people who do a good job in general. It's like, oh, this person worked 5 weekends in a row and they never take vacation, and they're just so great, they're so great. And it's like, okay, what message are you sending to everyone else? Either that in order for them to get recognized, they have to do the same type of thing, or if they don't do it, you think they're not a great employee, or the expectation is for them to like burn themselves out. Like, what type of message are you sending when you're only praising people who are overworking themselves? Because there's having a strong work ethic and there's going above and beyond when you need to, but you also have to have boundaries. And it's not a good look to just like always continuously take on extra work because you want to be looked at as that star player, and then you go home crying every day because you're like so stressed out and upset and nobody's understanding where you're coming from. It's like you have to take care of yourself, but employers also have to step up and realize, you know, when you might be putting too much on somebody's plate, or it's a relationship, right? So I always say, like when someone's leaving, I'm like, okay, you are choosing to end your employment relationship with this organization. Like, it's a relationship. So the same way that you want to have open communication with, your family member or your partner, same thing, the work relationship. Like you said earlier, you spend a lot of time with the people you work with, sometimes more than you spend with the people you like. So there's a way that you have to be able to build the type of relationships that work so everybody's successful.
And I love that. I think that is a great way to end the first quick session of this conversation with you tonight, Tamara, regarding mental health. So I just want to remind everyone that we're going to keep this conversation going. It's going to be a part two coming out soon. So make sure that you subscribe and like to the Baked HR YouTube channel. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at BakedHR. And if you have questions, especially about this topic, or just any topic you want to see us talk about, then definitely send us an email at bakedhr@gmail.com. We will be more than happy to keep this conversation going even further because it's so important. And coming up, we're going to talk about mental health on the different aspect of it as well. So stay tuned. All right, y'all. See you next time.
All right.
Bye.